On the evening of August 29th, 1776, a damp wind drifted across the East River as thousands of exhausted Continental soldiers waited in complete silence behind their earthworks at Brooklyn Heights. Just days earlier, they had fought the largest battle ever seen in North America. Now they faced something even more terrifying. Behind them lay a narrow stretch of dark water. In front of them stood the most powerful army in the world. British campfires flickered across the fields, their glow stretching into the night like a tightening ring around George Washington's army. Every man understood the danger. If dawn arrived before they escaped, the American Revolution itself might end on the shores of Long Island. Only weeks before, confidence had filled the Continental Army. The Declaration of Independence had been approved in Philadelphia, transforming a colonial rebellion into a struggle for an entirely new nation. Yet declarations alone could not win wars. Britain answered with overwhelming force. During the summer of 1776, one of the largest expeditionary armies ever sent across the Atlantic gathered around New York Harbor. More than 30,000 British and German troops arrived alongside hundreds of warships commanded by Admiral Richard Howe, while his brother, General William Howe, prepared to crush the rebellion in a single decisive campaign. Washington understood exactly why New York mattered. Whoever controlled the city controlled one of the most valuable ports in North America and the waterways linking New England to the southern colonies. Losing it would be a severe blow. But abandoning it without a fight could destroy confidence in the fragile cause of independence. His army, though determined, was inexperienced. Many soldiers had never faced professional European troops in open battle. They were farmers, laborers, merchants, and craftsmen learning the brutal realities of war as they lived them. The British made the first move in late August. Landing on Long Island, they advanced toward American defensive positions spread across wooded hills and narrow country roads. Washington expected an attack against his front, but General Howe had something far more dangerous in mind. Guided by loyalist informants who knew the local landscape, British columns marched through Jamaica Pass during the night, slipping around the American left flank almost unnoticed. By morning, thousands of British soldiers emerged where few Continentals expected them. The battle quickly turned into chaos. American units suddenly found enemies appearing from multiple directions. Smoke rolled through forests where visibility disappeared after only a few yards. Officers struggled to find their regiments. Commands vanished beneath the roar of muskets and artillery. Brave rearguard actions slowed the British advance, but they could not stop it. Some Maryland troops launched desperate attacks against overwhelming numbers, sacrificing themselves so others could escape toward Brooklyn Heights. Their courage became legendary, but it came at a terrible cost. You can almost hear the confusion spreading across the battlefield. Wounded men called for help that often never came. Horses bolted through clouds of gunpowder smoke. Soldiers, who had begun the morning expecting victory, now hurried toward defensive lines, uncertain whether anyone beside them was still alive. Washington rode among the retreating forces, trying to restore order wherever he could. Watching his army driven back was one of the most painful moments of his military career. Yet despite the defeat, the Continental Army had not been destroyed. Thousands of soldiers withdrew into fortifications overlooking the East River. There they dug in while British forces surrounded them on land. To many observers, only one outcome seemed possible. The Royal Navy dominated the surrounding waters. British troops held nearly every approach. Washington and roughly 9,000 men appeared trapped. General Howe now faced an important decision. Rather than launching an immediate assault against fortified American positions, he chose caution. His experience during the costly Battle of Bunker Hill the previous year had convinced him that frontal attacks against prepared defenses could produce unnecessary casualties. Instead, he tightened his lines and prepared for a formal siege, believing time favored Britain. That decision created the narrowest window of opportunity. Washington recognized that remaining where he was meant eventual surrender. His army lacked sufficient supplies for a prolonged siege, and once British warships moved into the East River, escape would become impossible. There was only one chance. The entire army would have to cross nearly a mile of open water without the British discovering what was happening. The plan demanded extraordinary secrecy. Orders spread quietly through the camps. Fires continued burning to convince British observers that nothing had changed. Soldiers were instructed to speak softly and prepare without attracting attention. Wagons, horses, artillery pieces, and thousands of men all had to disappear during a single night. One careless shout, one accidental musket shot, or one British patrol moving too close could expose everything. The task fell largely to experienced mariners from Massachusetts, especially Colonel John Glover's regiment from Marblehead. Before the war, many had earned their living navigating dangerous coastal waters and fishing grounds. Now those same skills would become indispensable. Throughout the evening, small boats gathered along the riverbank. One by one, soldiers climbed aboard before disappearing into the darkness toward Manhattan. The crossing was slow and exhausting. Boats returned again and again through shifting tides. Heavy cannons had to be loaded carefully without capsizing the vessels. Horses resisted boarding. Officers counted regiments repeatedly, trying to ensure no units were forgotten. Washington refused to leave until every possible soldier had crossed safely. As the hours passed, thousands reached the opposite shore, but dawn crept ever closer. Then something happened that later generations would remember almost as a miracle. As daylight approached, many American troops still remained on the Brooklyn side. Under ordinary conditions, British lookouts would soon have spotted the evacuation. Instead, a dense morning fog settled over the East River and Brooklyn Heights. Historians debate precisely how unusual the weather was, but contemporary accounts consistently describe thick fog rolling across the water at exactly the moment it was most needed. The mist concealed the final stages of the withdrawal, hiding boats moving back and forth between the shorelines. Stand quietly on that riverbank for a moment. The oars dip into dark water without splashing. Cannon wheels creak softly across wooden planks. Faces disappear inside the fog only a few yards away. No one knows whether the silence will last another minute or another hour. Every heartbeat feels louder than the river itself. By the time British forces finally advanced into the abandoned American positions, Washington's army had vanished. The achievement was astonishing. Nearly 9,000 soldiers, along with artillery, supplies, horses, and equipment, had escaped across the East River without losing the army to capture. It remains one of the most remarkable withdrawals in American military history, accomplished not through battlefield victory, but through discipline, organization, experienced seamanship, careful deception, and favorable weather. The campaign, however, was far from over. British forces soon occupied New York City. Washington would suffer additional defeats during the difficult months that followed, retreating across New Jersey as enlistments expired and morale sank. To many Europeans, the rebellion appeared close to collapse. Even some Americans questioned whether independence had been a mistake. But because the army survived Brooklyn, the revolution itself survived. Washington understood something many commanders throughout history had failed to grasp. An army does not always serve its country best by standing and fighting to the last man. Sometimes, preserving the force is the greater victory. Without an army, there could be no future campaigns, no crossing of the Delaware, no victories at Trenton and Princeton, no endurance through Valley Forge, and ultimately no triumph at Yorktown. The retreat from Brooklyn also transformed Washington's leadership. He became more cautious about risking his army in direct confrontations against superior British forces. Instead, he increasingly relied on mobility, strategic withdrawals, surprise attacks, and patience. Those lessons shaped the remainder of the war and helped turn a seemingly impossible struggle into one Britain could never fully extinguish. Years later, many battles would earn greater fame than the evacuation from Brooklyn. They produced dramatic victories, captured enemy armies, or forced political negotiations. Yet none of those successes could have happened if Washington's army had disappeared in August 1776. The revolution came closer to ending on that humid night than many people realize. The story of Brooklyn is therefore not one of glorious conquest, but of survival. It reminds us that history often changes, not only through spectacular victories, but through disciplined decisions made under unbearable pressure. In the darkness along the East River, thousands of ordinary soldiers climbed into small boats, believing they might never reach the opposite shore. They crossed anyway. Because they did, the struggle for American independence continued, and the future of an emerging nation remained alive for another day.